Welcome to another episode of Planet Possible. I'm Niki Roach. This is something new, so it's an extra once a month episode that'll react to current events in water, climate and nature. We're calling it a MiniPod, and it'll only take about 15 minutes of your time, and it means you get a Planet Possible update every 2 weeks. Each MiniPod, I'll be joined by an environmental expert guest, and together we'll discuss 3 key current talking points that'll keep you bang up to date with the latest planet positive developments. So this MiniPod, my co-host is Alastair Chisholm, the Director of Policy at CIWEM, and coming up, we'll be talking about Ofwat's draft determination that came out very recently. We'll be talking about the King's speech and in particular Steve Reed's views on water sector reform, and Al will be explaining why he's passionate about sustainable water management in relation to the big new housing targets that have been set. So let's get started. Al, tell me about the draft determination and I guess why it's so newsworthy from your perspective.
Hi Niki. So everybody was really interested in how much water bills were going to go up. The headlines are there was put forward a proposal for about £104 billion of expenditure over 5 years by the water companies in their business plans that they put forward to Ofwat, and Ofwat has been studying those, taking its red pen to them, and has whittled that programme down to about 88 billion. So still absolutely loads of money to spend over a 5-year period. But everybody was really worried about the bill impact of those huge programs. Average bill increases, depending on whether you factored in inflation of kind of 45 to nearer 60% on the cards. And Ofwat has whittled that down by on average a third. The programme overall has shrunk by roughly 9%. But the bill impact has shrunk by about a third. Now, that is still going to put people's bills up quite significantly, and there is a fair bit of angst out there in response to that. Campaigners are certainly very angry. But it's undeniable that there is an awful lot of work that needs to be done to improve the state of infrastructure. So there's a range of measures in that programme covering everything from storm overflows through to new water resources. And I think the other notable thing within the draft determination was that Ofwat made a special announcement relating to Thames Water, and it has put it on a turnaround oversight regime, which basically requires Thames to put forward a whole new action plan, a financial resilience plan, and it has said that it may appoint an independent monitor of how well Thames are doing that turnaround. The particular performance measures that have been put on Thames feel really, I mean, if you're a campaigner, they won't feel onerous, they will feel what people will want to see. But I think in terms of Thames being able to deliver against that, they are being asked to reduce their storm overflows by 64% in 5 years, reduce their leakage by 19%, in 5 years, which if you consider Thames have really struggled to bring their leakage down, that feels massively challenging. Thames have proposed to put bills up by £191 per year by the end of that 5-year period. They're only being allowed to put them up by £99, which really, to me, that feels incredibly challenging. Now, that's not going to solicit a lot of sympathy from many people, but nevertheless it's interesting. One
of the things that struck me actually is how prescriptive Ofwat have been about the money that they have given to the sector, whilst probably more was given than the worst case scenario that many were expecting. There's definitely a lot more oversight is what I would say. There's a lot more governance. It certainly sounds that way from initial readings of what's come out, and actually line by line this is what the money needs to be spent on, and it is sensible. The challenge is it doesn't give you quite as much leeway to be a bit more creative with some of your solutions, for example. So not having that ability to flex where you might spend your programme. So from my perspective, seeing how we get more nature-based solutions delivered, well, actually, the more prescriptive you are, sometimes the harder it is to deliver those types of solutions to resolve spills from storm overflows. So I think it's interesting. We're seeing certainly much more regulatory oversight. But it's not that surprising. We've spoken, haven't we, many times. In fact, our last episode of the pod was with Thames and with campaigners from River Action, James Wallace and Steve Backshaw. And the frustration is palpable. So I guess if the regulator hadn't have gone in with more teeth, then everyone would have been really surprised. But it's definitely going to feel different, I think, over the next 5 years if you work in and around the water sector ecosystem.
Certainly on the nature-based solutions front, there is considerable concern that inflexibility is going to pretty much squeeze most of the nature-based solutions out of the programme.
I think my final takeaway from that is it's all about value. So the bills are all about understanding the value of water. You and I are bill payers in the UK. Do we value water enough? Do we pay enough for our water? Once you've lifted everybody out of water poverty, what should water cost? But also the value of all those other solutions. You know, things like nature-based solutions give us loads of other value beyond the stuff that you might see classically on a balance sheet. And I think we are grappling as a whole sector, not just the water sector, but how much do we value our environment? How much do we want to pay for our environment? What are all those extra benefits worth to us? And how do we measure and monitor and incentivize all of that? So for me, there's still a really big value question, I think, outstanding for me. Yeah, it's a wait and see. Well, that takes us on to number 2. So we've done draft determination. The second point that you thought was really newsworthy this week that we wanted to talk about was Steve Reed. So Steve Reed is the new Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, so the head of DEFRA. And he set out a bit of a plan for water reform. So tell me what your reading of that was, Al.
Steve Reed met with chief execs of the water companies. What Steve Reed set out were 4 initial steps towards water reform. Firstly, to ring fence the money that is being provided within this programme for infrastructure upgrades. What that basically said is there is no way you're getting your hands on that to pay bonuses and dividends. Thank you very much. Any of that money, any of that ring fence money that is not spent by the end of the programme will have to be returned to customers. So that's the second piece of it. The third piece of it was an announcement that government are going to require water companies to change their constitutions via the Articles of Association, which basically define the priorities for the company. And that is to put customers and the environment central to the objectives of those water companies. And the final piece was that they are going to set up customer panels which have the powers, and Steve Reed said this is a historic first, they are going to have the power to pull in water company board members and hold them to account. Now, the mechanism for how that happens, what teeth and how sharp those teeth might be, that is all stuff that is going to have to come out in the coming weeks and months. And he has been very, very clear to stress that this is just the beginning. And I think the government are planning on embarking on a whole longer term policy revamp, basically, in regard to water.
And the Articles of Association, it's not the catchiest, is it? But it's an interesting one because I think you've talked about it certainly, and CIWEM have talked about it in the Freshwater Future work that you did right at the start of this year, and thinking how you put purpose and you put the environment a bit more front and centre into an organisation. And it always makes me think of the conversation we had a couple of seasons ago on the pod about a situation in Aotearoa in New Zealand, but about Te Mana o Te Wai, so putting the health of the waterway first, giving the health of the waterway a voice and it being a stakeholder. It's really stayed with me, that. So there's a kind of link for me between that and kind of what's coming out here, which is about saying, how do you give the environment a voice within a corporate organisation? That was kind of my reading of it, certainly. And some water companies have started to do that. Anglian have done that, certainly. So I guess it's kind of pushing the rest of the sector in the same direction, isn't it?
What we said is it needs to become a condition of the water company's licence. It needs to have purpose statements built up that can be regulated against. So there's a whole range of layers of this that will really need to be fleshed out.
I'm really pleased that they're formally kind of connecting customers. I mean, there's lots of engagement with customers already. I think it's really interesting to bring that right into the heart of the business and doing that formally in a way that probably hasn't been done before. So some stuff for us to mull over and see how it plays out, really.
I don't think we should shy away from the fact that there will be some healthy scepticism around some of these things. I mean, there's an awful lot of people out there who want the water industry to be renationalised. Compared to that, this will feel like window dressing. But renationalisation was never a likely outcome. I think what we need to do now is try and harness what's been put on the table as best we can to make it as effective as possible.
Okay, so those are your 2 big news stories, both related to water, but no surprise given the week that we've had. So your third one, we sort of drift a little bit away from water. So you wanted to talk about the thing you're really kind of fired up about, really, which is around sustainable water management and housing. Tell me a bit about what you've seen in the news and why it's so important to you, Al.
The stuff we've just talked about, that was week 1. Week 2, we had the state opening of Parliament and the King's speech, and that put on the table 40 pieces of new legislation. Quite a lot of environmental stuff embedded across that number. But there were two that really, well, maybe two that really stood out for me. One was the Water Special Measures Bill, which it's what Labour have been saying they're going to do. Another actually was the English Devolution Bill. And on this sustainable water management piece, that might give metro mayors a bit more regional context to strategic planning of water. And that hopefully can drive things to a more joined up and better approach of building in local context to water decision making. But the one that really resonates with me, and I think is absolutely crucial that we have to get right, is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Now, Labour have been very, very vocal about their desire to turbocharge growth. I think all of their future spending ambitions are really reliant on them getting growth up. And a key enabler of that is to bring forward rapid infrastructure delivery and rapid housing delivery. So they want to deliver 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. There are pressures on water resources in parts of the country. And actually those parts of the country are areas where previous government wanted to see significant growth in areas like Cambridge. What we have to make sure is that housing growth comes hand in hand with the water measures that actually enable that housing growth to be sustainable. Big infrastructure is a part of that picture, but it doesn't matter how quickly you make it possible to navigate planning and consenting regimes for those bits of major infrastructure. They are just not going to come on stream quickly enough to fill the gap in demand and enable that housing delivery. So we have to do something at the household level as well, or the property level. And that means three things: ambitious water efficiency levels, updates to the building regulations to mandate those efficiency levels through water fixtures and fittings, efficient water fixtures and fittings that are enabled by a water labelling scheme. And then the third bit of the jigsaw is the drainage side of things. Now, in the last decade or more, we've seen about 1.5 million homes being delivered, and the drainage impacts of those have just absolutely exacerbated the problem of storm overflows, right? We add another 1.5 million in even quicker. That is going to completely outweigh the programs that the water companies are putting in. So we really need, firstly, Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. We need that taken forward quick, smart. No more prevarication, just get it in, because that will mandate sustainable drainage systems in new development. And then really more broadly within the planning reforms, we would advocate that government introduce a kind of a sponge cities principle whereby we start retrofitting sustainable drainage into the wider urban fabric. And that will go some way to mitigating the kind of extra water demand that all this housing brings about.
I would just add to that as well, something about helping homeowners and tenants in homes to know what individual action they can take as well. I don't mean that like to pass the responsibility, but I literally mean as well, not instead as, because there's lots that you can do at property level that's relatively straightforward, like finding ways to disconnect your downpipes, you know, for example, and putting the water into a water butt. Feels like a relatively small action, but actually if we did that at scale, it does start to make quite an impact. But I just think, from my perspective, I'm just not sure people know like what's possible. And so for me, it would be amazing if, as part of this debate, we could just share a little bit of actually all the things that we can do individually that will genuinely make a tangible difference. Don't put stuff down your drains that shouldn't go down there. It's only the 3 Ps, isn't it? Pee, paper, poo. That's it. Don't stick unflushables down your loo. Try and disconnect your drain pipes so that they're running into water butts for rainwater. Those kind of things. Doable, and not for everybody. But actually, I'm just not sure people necessarily know what's possible.
No, I think to us, this is bread and butter. People do want to know what they can do, what the small, relatively easy changes to lifestyle that they can do that will actually make a difference. And I think there's growing interest in things like water resilient gardening, how long a shower is kind of okay to have. There's a whole raft of easy things, quick wins, and I think it is as simple as getting some friendly information out there. Just going back to Ofwat very, very quickly, they are introducing a water efficiency fund as part of that draft determination. That is focused on water efficiency. Actually, I think they could take it beyond that and do an awareness programme around all kinds of water management in the home. We kind of term it living with water. And that is a term that we've actually featured on the pod in a different context, but I think it's quite applicable, actually.
Well, that's a really lovely positive place to leave it, isn't it? That kind of thinking about the massive water efficiency innovation challenge that's coming as well. Well, thank you, Al. That was a rapid canter through what has been 2 very, very busy weeks worth of news, really. So lots for us to get our teeth into. There'll be another regular episode of Planet Possible up very soon, and then another one of these 2 weeks afterwards. So that's it for now, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.